Instructional Leadership Show, episode 255, When Teacher Performance Issues Remain Unresolved. Welcome, everyone, to the Instructional Leadership Show. I'm your host, Justin Bader, and in this episode, we're exploring the question of how we can move forward when teacher performance issues remain unresolved at the end of the year. As much as we would like to wrap everything up when we wrap up teacher evaluations, we know that instructional improvement doesn't necessarily happen on a fixed schedule. We have deadlines that we need to meet for completing evaluations. The school year comes to an end at some point. And yet improvement doesn't necessarily fit into that timeline. And you may have teachers on your staff now who have not improved to the level that you would like. They may not be meeting expectations, and you may have had to give them an evaluation that indicates that they're better than they are. If you were a little bit short on evidence, you may have had to submit an evaluation that you are not entirely happy with. So let's talk about that as a starting point. What if you did have to turn in an evaluation just now, or if you're going to have to in the next couple of days, turn in an evaluation that is better than the teacher deserves? Well, the reason you might have to do this is, of course, evidence. If you have a pretty clear sense, a pretty clear hunch that indicates to you that not all is well, things are not as good as they should be, and yet you're short on evidence, often we have to default to satisfactory until we can prove otherwise. We may end up reaching the end of the year really just dissatisfied with the disconnect between what we have to say in our evaluation and what we really know to be the case. Even so, though, we have to recognize that evaluations don't have any kind of magical power, right? They can do certain things. They can clarify the level of a teacher's performance. They can put some steps in place, but evaluations in no universe fix everything. They really should accomplish two major things that we're going to talk about today. Formal evaluations should give each teacher an accurate rating of their performance according to your evaluation criteria, according to the process that's in place in your organization, and they should initiate appropriate next steps for each teacher. But that is not going to resolve every problem. That is not going to fix everything in each teacher's practice. It's not going to get everybody to where you want them to be. And what we need to think about now is how we can set ourselves up for success in the coming year, following the processes that are in place, acting in good faith, doing some things that may fall outside the evaluation process to bring about improvement, but that through coordinated effort can get people to where they need to be. In the chat right now, if you're joining us live, I would love to hear from you if you have someone on your staff, somebody that you're responsible for who is not where they need to be. Give me a yes in the chat if that is the situation that you are dealing with now, where it's not like you marked them unsatisfactory and then they disappeared forever. They're still around. We still need to figure out how to help them improve to a satisfactory level so that they can meet your students' needs. I see, everybody is saying yes in the chat. Lots and lots of yeses. Feel free to let me know more about that, maybe what you've been through before. If you've ever been through a process where you wrote a negative evaluation and then it got overturned, or you took it to your boss and your boss said, I don't think you have enough to go with here, or you turned it in and the union filed a grievance, there are lots of ways this process can go wrong formality-wise, but there are also lots of ways this process can fail to bring about the necessary improvement. But of course, that's our primary goal, right, is to bring about the necessary improvement. So our first ideal outcome is that we use the teacher evaluation process to get everyone up to satisfactory. And if we can't, if that process does not result in satisfactory performance from each and every staff member, then we hope that there's something else that can get us to where we need to be as a school. And that may mean turnover. That may mean productive turnover in the sense of somebody retiring or resigning or moving into a different position or not being invited back, just depending on what the possibilities are in your organization. We want any of those possibilities to occur so that we don't end up with the last possibility here, which is continued substandard performance. We do not want to be in this same position next year where kids are not getting served. We have people who are not getting it done in their jobs, and we're continuing to pay them for doing those jobs. So we need to find ways to set ourselves up for success and to set our teachers up for success and to set our students up for success. And productive turnover is one of those things that we have to be very careful about, because if we do it well, it can be a little bit of a cheat code to getting a better staff, right? If you have someone who leaves for a reason other than a negative evaluation and you're glad that they left and you get to hire somebody better, well, that's kind of a freebie, right? Give me give me a yes in the chat if you've ever had that happen and it's been just kind of a bonus. I had that happen once when we had a staff member who's just very difficult, wasn't incompetent, wasn't like there wasn't anything egregious that we could really say, okay, you're unsatisfactory, you have to move on, but was just enough of a drain on the staff that it was a huge relief when we made some program changes and her job shifted in just a few little ways that she was not on board with. And she said, okay, I'm going to retire. I'm out of here. And everybody was so relieved that she retired. And it wasn't acrimonious. It was just kind of a bonus that she moved on in that way. Yeah, thank you for those comments in the chat, and keep those coming. Let me know what your thoughts and reactions are to what we're talking about here. A big part of our strategy after evaluations, of course, needs to be professional development. Sometimes the individual changes that need to occur, for multiple people can happen through whole staff professional development, right? If we do some things as a whole staff and commit to making some changes collectively, often that can address individual performance issues. And I'll give an example that my school did not particularly experience, but I've heard of many schools who have gone through this, including my co-authors. You may have adopted a program that's designed to address social skills or social emotional learning or character or anti-bullying. It may be zones of regulation. It may be the Franklin Covey Leader in Me program. You know what I'm talking about? Give me an example if you can think of one, or just give me a yes in the chat if you know what the kind of whole school programs that I'm thinking of. A lot of times, conscious discipline is another one that I know works this way. A lot of times we can solve individual problems by creating a new emphasis, a new culture, a new set of kind of collective expectations that is more powerful than just attempting to work with one person. And I can't endorse any of those specific programs that I named because I haven't worked with them. But sometimes it is very powerful to not target an individual, but just to say, this is what we're doing as a school. That can be a great investment. Yeah, zones of regulation. Yeah, so there are lots out there, do your homework on those, certainly, and don't adopt any of these hastily. But sometimes that can really obviate or make unnecessary handling of those kind of individual issues if what we're doing as a staff overwhelms those individual struggles and individual problems. Another example of this type of change is curriculum adoption, right? If you have someone who is struggling with their planning, they really are just not great at planning their units and their lessons. Well, if you adopt a new curriculum in which they are expected to look through those and understand them and be trained on them and then teach them rather than write those lessons and units themselves, well, that may be exactly what some of your people who are struggling needed. So, there are lots of ways that we can kind of get an end run around those individual struggles through whole staff changes, through things that transcend the individual. But I think we also have to be very, very careful not to kind of punish everyone for issues that really are individual in nature, right? Like if your school generally has great discipline, well-behaved students, but you have one classroom where things are just really chaotic because of individual teacher practice issues. If you just have one person whose classroom management just stinks, trying to address that by imposing an unnecessary solution on everybody else is not going to get us there. It's going to really feel like collective punishment. So if it truly is an individual issue, we want to make sure that we're not dragging everybody else through something they don't need, and instead focus on that one-to-one support. It could be that that support is in the form of coaching. It could be that it's in the form of outside professional development. It could be something else that avoids wasting that whole staff time on changes that are not necessary for everybody else. But if we do need something that is appropriate for the whole staff, certainly the leverage is there. And if you have a large number of people, if you have a large number, say, of new teachers, if you'll be hiring a lot of new people and you want to get ahead of any problems that they might be facing, or if you know you have a lot of people who are struggling, then it may be worth looking at a whole staff solution rather than trying to just deal with people piecemeal. And I thought what I would share is a couple of questions for you to reflect on as you think about, is this an individual issue for maybe a couple people, or is this a whole staff issue that we really need to address through professional development? Well, the first question is it that? Is it an individual or a collective issue? Second, and I think this is really crucial for your veteran teachers, will our stronger teachers still benefit from participating? And this is where I have to say some good things about the Franklin Covey Leader in Me program that my own kids' school is doing. I've never worked with that as a teacher or an administrator, but my own kids' schools have gone through the Leader in Me training, and it's expensive. It's a lot of PD, but it seems to be good for everyone. And if you've ever been through any kind of program like that, that gives you kind of a common vocabulary, common adult expectations, and kind of does some skill building across the board, you know how powerful that type of thing can be. But because it's so powerful, we also need to be very careful that it's consistent with everything else that we're doing. If it's going to be a distraction, if it's going to be a contradiction, it's going to make things very difficult for us to move forward with, if it feels like we're kind of running in several different directions simultaneously. So the potential for losing focus, the potential for distraction, I think is kind of high there. So we need to really be thoughtful about that type of decision for the whole staff. Let's talk now about individual support and individual interventions for people who are not meeting expectations and the evaluation process did not get them there. One thing that we always tend to think about this time of year is turning up the heat on an individual. And we have probably all seen this go well, and we have all seen this go poorly, where someone faces some sort of pressure, some sort of change, some sort of perhaps unpleasantness that is intended essentially to get them to shape up or ship out, right? The pressure of either having to adapt to some change that they don't want or move on often is just not a super pleasant experience, but it's also often quite effective. I want to talk about this in some depth because I think this is both a very powerful thing and a place where we can go deeply wrong as leaders. Does this always go right? Let me know in the chat if this is something that you have seen go wrong, where a leader maybe changes a teacher's grade assignment. Maybe you're going to go from teaching seniors to teaching ninth graders, or maybe you're going to go from teaching this subject to teaching that subject, or maybe your schedule is going to change. There's something that's not really about the teaching skills, it's about the conditions of working, or maybe you're going to have a new partner or a new team. There's something about the conditions that puts the pressure on the individual to just quit. And sometimes that pressure is explicit, and sometimes it feels like harassment. And we've got to be very careful about not making it feel like harassment that's going to kind of reflect poorly on us as leaders. But do you know what I'm talking about when it comes to that kind of pressure that feels like harassment? Give me a yes in the chat if you have seen that happen, where the changes that were made seem arbitrary, they seem punitive. Like one that I think really rubs people the wrong way is being forced to change classrooms for apparently no reason. Have you ever seen that happen just kind of as a form of pure harassment to get rid of somebody? Like, oh, you're going to have to clean out your room, and they got to wax the floors, and you got to move into a different room, and you got to pack up all your stuff and throw away all this stuff. Have you ever seen that happen in an effort to get rid of somebody? I think when that happens, often it is quite clear that the administrator is not acting in good faith, and that really this is kind of an end run around the official processes that are in place. And I think we've got to be really careful to demonstrate that we are acting in good faith, because that perception is going to determine whether other people support us in the moves that we make. And that includes our boss, that includes perhaps a union if there is one, that includes certainly the rest of the staff. We don't want to be in a position of being alone and being under attack and being criticized for doing what needs to be done to address a teacher performance issue. So we've got to act in good faith. And a starting point for acting in good faith is following our established processes very clearly. For example, if you have someone on a performance improvement plan, that's fine. You may need to put them on a performance improvement plan, but the justification for putting them on a performance improvement plan has to come from accepted processes itself, right? Like if you do an observation and in that observation you identify concerns that justify putting the teacher on a performance improvement plan, that's above board. That's going to be seen as acting in good faith. If, on the other hand, you do a formal observation, everything is great, you write it up, everything is great in the written report, and you move on with your day and the teacher moves on with their year and everything sounds great, and then you put them on a performance improvement plan, that's when we start to get into trouble for acting in what people perceive as not good faith. Any Office fans? Any fans of The Office? It's been in reruns for many years now, and we rewatched it recently. Give me a me in the chat if you have seen at least some of The Office with Jim and Dwight and Michael Scott and Pam and everybody. Give me a me in the chat if you're an Office fan. You remember Ryan when Ryan first gets promoted in the office and he's kind of a punk and he, I think, is jealous of Jim because Pam likes Jim and, there's some stuff going on there. And Ryan, at one point, give me a me in the chat if you're not. I know we have some Office fans here, so let me know if that's you. There's one point where Ryan says to Jim, Jim, I need to give you a formal warning about your performance. And Jim just has no idea how to react to that because it's not about anything. He doesn't say, oh, your sales numbers are slipping or you're late to work, or like he doesn't have any reason for it. It's just a formal warning about your performance. And it's clear that Ryan is just being petty and vindictive, right? He just doesn't like Jim and he's, kind of taking that out on him through this process of a formal warning about his performance. Yeah, and I'm not sure I like it. Yeah, like everything that happens in the office is a bad example, right? Like I think we can learn a ton just kind of by doing the opposite of what the characters in the office do. So when it comes to things like PIPs, they really have to be justified by the evidence and by the process itself. And if we're going to go outside of the things that we do for everyone, if we're going to put someone on a PIP, for example, you're not going to put everyone on a PIP. We need to make sure that the processes that we are doing for everyone, like formal observations, evaluations, classroom walkthroughs, we need to make sure that those processes produce the evidence that justifies going above and beyond those processes. That's what's going to help us avoid accusations of harassment and demonstrate that we're acting in good faith. Let's take a look at a couple of other things to keep in mind as we seek to avoid accusations of harassment. If you do have to make changes to people's teaching assignments, that's obviously something we have to do anyway. People are going to move around. We're going to need people to teach different classes from year to year. We're going to have changes in our enrollment. We need to make sure that we're treating those changes as simply necessary changes, not opportunities to get revenge on people that we have a problem with or to kind of go after people that, that we think we need to get rid of. So to the greatest extent possible, we want to make sure that we are making the majority of those changes visibly in a neutral way, right? Sometimes people are going to need to move classrooms. Sometimes people are going to need to change grade levels. And if some of the people who are making those changes are obviously good teachers, obviously people that we don't have any problem with, obviously people that have not been on a PIP that we're not trying to get rid of, that is going to increase the perception that we're acting in good faith. If we are doing something that is targeted as an improvement, right? We're putting, some effort in place. We're making some change to increase someone's odds of success. That is also going to demonstrate that we're acting in good faith. Let me give an example. Let's say you have a teacher who has been teaching calculus and really does not have the background knowledge. They've really been struggling. They've been getting parent complaints. They have been getting student complaints and students are not succeeding. Maybe students are taking the AP exam and not passing. This might be a situation where a change of assignment is more effective and more appropriate than a negative evaluation. It may be that the person is teaching to the best of their ability and is for the most part fine, but they're being put in a position by teaching this AP calculus course that really is beyond their abilities and beyond their content knowledge. In that case, changing that calculus teacher to, say, a 10th grade geometry or a 9th grade algebra 1 or algebra 2 position, changing their responsibilities will be seen as an act of good faith and something that increases their odds of success. If, on the other hand, though, we make changes that actually make it less likely that the person will succeed, if we make their job more difficult, if we take away their classroom and make them travel around the building on a cart, if we give them more challenging classes and things that they're ill-equipped to handle, those are the kinds of changes that are going to be seen as harassment. And we may succeed in getting someone to quit. We may succeed in getting someone to see the writing on the wall and move on. But we also risk the possibility that we are the one who moves on if we don't win the rest of our staff over and demonstrate that we're acting in good faith. So just a couple of overall recommendations as we think about what to do moving forward. I'll take questions. I'd love to hear your reactions to some of this. My overall recommendations for dealing with teacher performance situations that are not resolved at this point in the year are to continue to follow the process. Make sure you are diligent about those formal observations and getting the paperwork done so that if something is negative, it at least gets accepted, that you have crossed every T and dotted every I. Make sure that your evidence is well organized, that you have everything you need to demonstrate the validity of your ratings. And when it comes to the evaluation process, you want to just follow that. Don't complicate it. Don't throw the kitchen sink at people. Follow the process. And if someone does need to be below satisfactory, use the process that you have in place to demonstrate that they are below satisfactory. When it comes to making those decisions about whole staff PD, I think there is nothing more powerful than getting into classrooms every day to give you the nuanced perspective and the firsthand detail about specifically what people need. So if you're thinking about a school-wide program like, say, Zones of Regulation or Leader in Me, or maybe something that's more appropriate for the type of school that you're in, you will know that much more confidently if you are in classrooms every day. So it's probably not any surprise to hear me say that is my main recommendation, that if you're getting into classrooms every day, that is going to give you firsthand evidence. And if you take notes, you can send those notes to the teacher. I highly recommend, maybe not the first couple of times, but as you get into the groove of visiting classrooms every day, that you start taking those notes, use detailed timestamps, use the language of your evaluation criteria, and then share those notes with the teacher. And this is a great thing to do to bolster your confidence in what you're saying, to create a paper trail, and to make it easy for you to have better conversations with teachers simply by taking good notes. And one way you can do that in repertoire is to make sure that you are referring to your evaluation criteria in the way that you describe the practice that you're seeing. And in Repertoire, our app for classroom walkthroughs and teacher evaluations, one thing you can do is a keyword search to find relevant criteria, and then you can pin them on the screen. For example, if you search for the word challenging, you may have several criteria that talk about challenging and critical thinking, and you've got lots of different criteria there that can be difficult to keep in your mind, right? It would be difficult to memorize the full text of these. But if you pin them on screen and then take notes with them on screen, what's going to happen is that you're going to notice things that you wouldn't otherwise have noticed. You're going to capture details in the quotes and in the descriptions of what's happening in the lesson using vocabulary, using terminology, using specific expectations from those criteria, even if you never mention the criteria, even if you never cite the criteria that you're keeping in mind as you observe. That change, above all else, is going to produce higher quality notes, higher quality evidence, and set you up for success with whatever high stakes things you need to do in the evaluation process. If you are an Instructional Leadership Association member, Repertoire is one of the chief member benefits, and I'd be happy to walk you through that, give you a personal tour and training on that. And if you're not a member, I'd be happy to tell you all about it. You can go to principalcenter.com/demo. And there are a couple other things that may be worth considering. I'm going to give you my full list here, and then we'll jump back and talk about a couple of these other next steps to consider. We talked about professional development for your whole staff, but of course, if you have someone who needs individual support, that could be individualized as well. It could be coaching support. It could be outside training. I got to go to some classroom management workshops early on in my career as a teacher because that was something that I individually struggled with, and that was a great help. I got to work with a mentor teacher, and that was the kind of thing that for me really saved my career, right? As an undergraduate, I did not get good training in classroom management and didn't really know what I was doing, frankly, when I started as a teacher. So that kind of support that we provide for people really can be life-changing, really can make all the difference in the world. And it benefits our students if we don't have to have unnecessary turnover. We want people to succeed. We are not trying to get rid of people. We're trying to make sure that every student has every opportunity to learn. We want every student to have good teaching every day, and we know that is going to take some work in a lot of specific cases. A couple of things to consider on an individual basis in addition to support. Please don't hesitate to use the official processes that are in place, like PIPs, letters of reprimand, if there is some sort of inappropriate behavior. There are things that we have to do to create the paper trail to get the HR support, to get the union support, to get the staff support to non-renew someone. So we want to be operating in parallel on all these fronts, and we certainly want to to believe in people, to have hope for people that they can can make the improvements that they need to, but we don't want that to slow us down in collecting evidence. And collecting evidence through classroom walkthroughs and formal observations is a good way to make sure that you're covering all of your bases, even as you are doing some of these other things like PIPs. So if you're a member, we've got the HR toolkit, Principals HR toolkit, where we have a template for letters of reprimand and a decision tree for performance improvement plans and lots of things like that. One more thing that I'll talk about that doesn't necessarily have to be for teachers who are struggling is the peer observation protocol. This is a great thing to do with a couple of teachers at once, some who are struggling and some who are not, because it can really demonstrate that your intentions are good. This is not a punitive thing. You're just trying to help people learn from one another. And in the peer observation protocol, I draw on some ideas from my book with Heather Bell Williams, Mapping Professional Practice, to help you identify specific things that you want the observing teacher to look for when they visit another teacher's classroom so that they can learn from their practice and take some things back to their own classroom. So we have something called a 5x5 observation guide, and then there's a whole set of steps that you go through to figure out, how can I set up my teachers for success in peer observations? How can I help them see what is going to be transferable to their classroom? Because I don't know if you've ever had this experience of going on a peer observation or sending someone on a peer observation, and the person who is observing, whether that's you or somebody else, kind of misses the point. They kind of fail to grasp what you wanted them to notice, and then they come back and they try some things that did not get at the core issues that they were going to observe. Like Heather was telling me recently about a teacher that she was working with who went and observed and then came back with a shopping list. Like, hey, this other teacher has all this great stuff in their classroom. I want that same stuff, and that'll help me to be successful, just like that teacher is successful. And she said, wait a minute, this is not a shopping trip. We were not trying to make a shopping list here. We're trying to figure out how we can transfer those successful practices from that teacher's classroom to your classroom. So we've got to really keep the attention on the right things. And in the peer observation protocol process, you are figuring out what those are in advance so that you can make them clear to the teacher you're observing. Let me know in the chat, have you ever done or sent someone on a peer observation? Give me a yes or a no in the chat, and we can talk about those depending on what people want to share there. Have you ever done or sent someone on a peer observation? Give me a yes or a no. I've got a yes. Good deal. Yes, coming in. While those are coming in, I'll also mention our 24-month cohort program, 1000 Conversations. This is all about getting consistent with those classroom walkthroughs and talking with people about their practice to gain much richer, more detailed insights about where their practice is, what we need to do as a school to move forward. And I'll put this list back on the screen of possible next steps to consider for next year. And I'll take a look back at the comments here. We've got yes, 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 no, yes. Teachers are asking for peer observations. Yeah, and I know in a lot of cases, you may have people coming in to the profession who have never taught before, who have never had teaching modeled for them other than when they were students. They've never really had the opportunity to participate in peer observations as a professional. So this could be a really valuable thing for people who really want to learn from their colleagues, who want to get better. And the more people you have who have that motivation, the more successful you will be with the people that you're making do this because they need to, because they're really struggling. Let's see, another comment here. We tend to send a coach or admin with the person and have them with a specific note-taking page. Yeah, great strategy there. The additional twist that I'll add on to this that we include in the peer observation protocol is doing some pre-observation, because sometimes the observing teacher is a good teacher, or excuse me, the teacher that's going to be observed is a good teacher, but they're not the right person for this teacher to observe. And one of the reasons that could be the case is that if you have someone who is such an amazing advanced master teacher, like they're way up here, and you're sending someone to observe them who's way down here, and the gap between those two people is just so huge that it's unrealistic that they can kind of learn from them. So doing a little bit of homework, doing a little bit of pre-work to figure out who is the right mentor teacher for them to observe, or the right peer for them to observe, so that they can actually learn from them. Sometimes you don't want to use your very, very best teachers if what they're doing is just too advanced. It's going to look like rocket science, and it's going to kind of confuse them. So keep that in mind as a possibility. Yeah, and Valerie says, I learned that I must attend with the person, and we use a template to capture observation. So yeah, in addition to doing some pre-observation to match up people with the right teachers to observe, absolutely going with them is a core part of it, so that you are taking notes as they're taking notes, and then you will learn a lot from what they observe and what they don't observe. So you want to see, what is this person noticing that that I noticed, or that's different from what I noticed, and how does that shape what we do next. Often what people need, I'm going to leave you with this thought. Often what people need is not more feedback. As instructional leaders, we have this kind of, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail problem. We think we can solve every problem in teaching with more and better feedback. And I have to say, as much as I like feedback, as much as I've written about feedback and as many trainings and webinars as I've done on feedback, I don't think feedback can fix every problem. Sometimes people need content knowledge. Sometimes people need professional development. Sometimes people need a school-wide initiative. And sometimes people need to get fired. Feedback does not fix everything. So if you are at this point in the year and wondering how to move forward, I'll again put up a little bit of a menu of options, and feel free to hit me up if you want to chat about any of these, just a particular situation that you're dealing with. Maybe this person needs to be on a PIP. Maybe this person needs to receive a letter of reprimand, and then maybe that'll handle it. But feel free to reach out, and we can chat if that is something that you are interested in. And let me know if you have additional comments in the chat here, and we can talk about them now. Thank you so much for the work that you do every day. I know this is not easy stuff. It's not fun stuff, to put in dozens or hundreds of hours of work into evaluations and then still be at this point at the end of the year where you're just not satisfied with how someone is doing. They have just not made the improvement that they need to serve your students well. But please know that you are not alone in that. Every school has ongoing performance issues. The evaluations can be done, they can be turned in on time, they can be beautifully written, and they can still fall short of what's needed to get every teacher's practice to where it needs to be to serve our students. So keep at it. Don't get discouraged. Don't let yourself, don't beat yourself up or, talk down about yourself. Your efforts are making a difference. Even if they don't make a difference in the short term, please know that your investments in students will pay off in the long term. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll catch you next time here on the Instructional Leadership Show.